The fool who lost his queen. The price of truth. The fool who lost his queen. A cruel exchange. Imagine a man who risks everything, trading the brilliant diamond he owns for a cheap imitation, and in doing so, loses the very queen of his life. This is the story of Adrian Villalba, who coldly scorned his wife Elisa while she carried their child, only to pursue a younger, dazzling model. He thought he had upgraded his life, constantly boasting and rubbing his pride into his ex-wife's wound. He still didn't know it, but Elisa had also decided to show up at that event. And when she walked into that ballroom, nothing would ever be the same. Before we dive in, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and leave your comments. The receipt and the real betrayal. Some women discover infidelity through forgotten messages on a cell phone, others by a strange perfume on a shirt. Eliza discovered it through a restaurant receipt in her husband's suit pocket, a receipt for 2 people on the day he claimed to have worked late. But what truly destroyed her was not finding out that Adrian had a mistress. It was discovering that the mistress was the exact age of her daughter when the affair began, 5 years, and that in 3 days he would be taking her to the most important social event of the year as his new partner, while Eliza was expected to stay home, pretending not to know anything. The morning sun of Buenos Aires filtered through the silk curtains of the Villalba family mansion, creating a play of golden light that danced on the Italian marble of the entrance hall. At 32, Elisa possessed a head-turning beauty, chestnut hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders, green eyes that shone with an almost hypnotic intensity, and a smile that, even when forced, managed to light up any room. She was delicately arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase, a ritual that had become her silent way of finding peace amidst the turmoil of her life. "Mommy, can I help?" Sophia's sweet voice echoed down the hall, and Eliza felt her heart instantly warm. Her 5-year-old daughter was her greatest joy, a small version of herself, with the same expressive green eyes and the same natural sweetness that seemed to radiate from within. "Of course, my princess." Elisa smiled genuinely for the first time that morning. The sound of hurried footsteps on the marble staircase announced Adrian's arrival. At 38, he was unquestionably an impressive man. Adrian Villalba was the CEO of Villalba & Associates, one of the largest business consultancies in Latin America. But with success came a transformation that Elisa had watched with growing sadness. The kind, attentive man she fell in love with had given way to someone cold, calculating, and worst of all, disrespectful. "Good morning," Adrian muttered distractedly, barely looking at his wife and daughter as he obsessively checked his phone. His messages seemed infinitely more interesting than the family he had promised to love and protect. "Daddy!" Sophia ran to him, her small arms outstretched for a hug that Adrian returned mechanically. His eyes never left the device screen. "Hi, honey. Daddy's busy now," his voice said, with that disguised impatience that had become his trademark at home. Elisa watched the scene with a heavy heart. "Adrian," Elisa tried to get his attention, her voice soft but determined. "It's Saturday. I thought we could spend the day together. Maybe take Sophia to the park or—" "Impossible." He interrupted her without looking up. "I need to review the presentation for the merger with the Rio de Janeiro hotel group. If we get this contract, we'll expand throughout Brazil." He finally looked at her, but his gaze was cold, almost condescending. "Some things are more important than park strolls, Elisa. I hope you understand." His words hurt her deeply, but Elisa had learned to maintain her composure. "Of course," she replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sophia and I will find something to do." Later, as they walked through the sunny streets, Sophia chatting animatedly, Eliza allowed herself to think about what her life had become. She couldn't help but notice how Adrian's fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, and something in his subtle smile as he typed made her stomach clench with a suspicion she had been trying to ignore for months. His phone began to ring, and he answered immediately, his voice adopting that charming, engaging tone he reserved for people he considered important. "Michaela, my dear," he said, walking toward his office. "Of course we can move up our meeting." Elisa felt the blood freeze in her veins. Michaela. That name had come up with increasing frequency. That night, lying in bed next to a deeply sleeping husband, Eliza looked at the ceiling and wondered when she had become a stranger in her own life. 2. The receipt of betrayal. The week continued its usual course in the Villalba mansion. Adrian left earlier and returned later, always with elaborate excuses about market analysis and international expansion strategies that demanded his constant attention. Elisa had become an expert at interpreting the signs. The phone he carried everywhere, the secret smiles while writing messages, the different perfume that sometimes permeated his clothes. It was a rainy Thursday when everything finally changed. Sophia was at school for an extra activity, and Elisa decided to use the free afternoon to catch up on some chores. She was organizing the closet when she found a suit of Adrian's that needed to go to the dry cleaners. As she checked the pockets, a habit developed after years of marriage, her fingers touched something that made her heart stop, a small folded paper. With slightly trembling hands, she unfolded what was clearly a restaurant receipt. But it wasn't just any restaurant. It was the iconic Tegui in Palermo, one of the city's most exclusive and romantic establishments. The receipt was for 2 people, including a bottle of Mendoza sparkling wine and dishes Adrian would never order for a business meeting. What made her completely collapse, however, was the date. 2 days prior, exactly the day he said he had been at the office preparing reports and came home after midnight, too exhausted to eat. All the suspicions, all the signs she had tried to rationalize or ignore, suddenly crystallized into an undeniable, painful truth. The sound of her phone ringing brought her back to reality. It was Julian Ramos, Adrian's partner. Ironically, one of the only true friends she still had. "Elisa, my dear," his warm, worried voice came through the line. "How are you?" Julian was everything Adrian had ceased to be. Kind, attentive, a man of solid principles who treated people with genuine respect. "Julian, Elisa hesitated, holding back the tears that threatened to overflow. "Do you have a few minutes? I need to talk to someone." "Always," he replied immediately. "I'm on my way." 40 minutes later, Elisa was in the living room, pouring coffee for Julian, while she tried to find words to express the storm of emotions raging in her heart. He watched her with those compassionate brown eyes, patiently waiting for her to find the courage to speak. "Julian," she began, her voice barely a whisper. Do you know anything about Adrian?" The silence that followed was an answer enough. She saw the pain reflected in Julian's face, the internal struggle between loyalty to his partner and genuine concern for her. "Elisa," he finally said, his voice heavy with sadness. "How long have we been friends?" "More than 10 years. "Then you know I would never lie to you." Julian leaned forward, his hands clasped. "But you also know this is an impossible position for me." Elisa showed him the restaurant receipt. "I found this today." Julian looked at the paper and closed his eyes, as if feeling physical pain. When he opened them again, there was a sadness and determination in them. "Her name is Michaela Duran," he said, each word coming out with difficulty. "She is 27 years old. She's a marketing consultant. She's been working with us for about 6 months. How long has this been going on?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. "I'd say it started 5 months ago, maybe a little longer." Julian sighed deeply. "Elisa, I tried to talk to Adrian several times. I tried to make him see the madness of what he was doing, what he was risking. His family, his reputation, everything. And what did he say? He said I was old-fashioned, that I didn't understand the complexities of modern life. He said you were content being just a trophy wife, that Michaela challenged him intellectually. The words wounded her deeply, more painful because they came through Julian, whom she knew was trying to soften the blow. Trophy wife? She repeated, tasting the words on her tongue as if they were poison. He's wrong, Elisa, Julian said vehemently. Completely wrong. You are one of the most intelligent and talented women I know. The fact that you chose to dedicate yourself to your family does not diminish your worth at all. Trophy wife, she murmured again, looking at her perfectly manicured garden. 27 years old? That's exactly how old I was when Adrian and I got married. The cruel irony of the situation was not lost on her. 3. The public execution. Elisa, Julian approached her, his voice soft but firm. You need to know one more thing. She turned, seeing something in his eyes that made her fear what was coming next. There's a gala event next week, the annual party of the Buenos Aires Business Association at the Four Seasons Hotel. Adrian is going to be there. And he hesitated, clearly struggling with the words. Michaela will also be there as his official partner. Elisa's world seemed to stop completely. She leaned against the windowsill, feeling her legs give way. Official partner? He told the specialized press that she is his new strategic partner, who will be officially introduced to Buenos Aires society at this event. Julian clenched his fists, his own anger palpable. He said you were taking care of personal family matters, that you prefer to keep your private life out of the business spotlight. Elisa closed her eyes, feeling a toxic mix of humiliation, anger, and a pain so deep it felt physical. Adrian wasn't just having an affair, he was actively replacing her, erasing her existence from his public life. How much longer, Julian? She asked, opening her eyes and looking at him. How much longer do you think he intends to keep this charade up? Honestly, I think he plans to file for divorce after the deal with the Brazilians is finalized. Michaela is ambitious, calculating. I think she sees you as a stepping stone to build her own empire. The revelation was like the final blow. Eliza sat heavily on the armchair, processing not only the end of her marriage, but the cruel and public way it was being executed. He's going to leave me with nothing, she murmured. Not if he doesn't have a choice, Julian said, a new determination emerging in his voice. Elisa, you are not the same vulnerable woman who married Adrian 7 years ago. You have grown, evolved. You have become a silent but powerful force. It's time to prove it. She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? You're going to the gala event. Julian, I can't. You can. And you will, he interrupted gently, but firmly. Not as the humiliated wife hiding at home, but as the strong, elegant woman you are. Let Adrian and his mistress know that you are not going to disappear in silence. And how do you suggest I do that? I don't even have an invitation. Julian smiled for the first time since he arrived. You're going as my partner. I am a partner in the firm. I have the right to bring whomever I want. He paused significantly. And I have some information about Adrian's questionable business practices that might be enlightening. Julian, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He stood up and walked toward her. Elisa, Adrian is not just betraying you. He is also betraying the ethical principles of our company. There are irregular contracts, undeclared commissions, a series of activities that could destroy our reputation if they came to light. Are you talking about blackmail? I'm talking about justice, Julian corrected, and protecting you and Sophia from what's to come. That night, after Julian left, Elisa found herself in Sophia's room, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. The innocence on the girl's face contrasted brutally with the storm of emotions raging in her mother's heart. Mommy is going to fight for us, my princess, she whispered, gently kissing her daughter's forehead. I'm not going to let him treat us as if we were disposable. When Adrian arrived home that night, later than ever, with Michaela's perfume still on his skin, he found Elisa waiting for him in the living room. But there was something different about her, something he couldn't immediately identify. "Still awake?" he asked, as always. "Adrian," she said, her voice surprisingly calm and controlled. "We need to talk." He looked at her with suspicion, noticing the change in her posture, the way she held her shoulders straight, her chin up. "About what?" "About the gala event next week." Elisa stood up gracefully, walking toward him. "I heard you'll have a special partner." Adrian's face paled slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Elisa, I can explain." "You don't need to," she interrupted, her voice maintaining that unsettling calm. "In fact, I think it will be a very revealing night for everyone involved." "What do you mean by that?" Elisa smiled. Not the forced, submissive smile he knew, but something new, something that carried a dangerous promise. "You'll know at the right time, Adrian. Good night." And with that, she went up the stairs, leaving him alone with his lies, and a growing feeling that he had completely lost control of the situation. 4. The transformation and the final showdown. The days leading up to the gala event were a whirlwind of preparation and transformation for Elisa. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to spend money on herself. Not just the quick, practical purchases she had become accustomed to, but a real investment in her own image and confidence. She called Isabel Vega, a longtime friend who had become one of the most sought-after stylists in Buenos Aires. "Isabel, I need your help. I need a dress for the Business Association Gala, and I need to look unforgettable." "What kind of unforgettable are we talking about here, darling? The traffic-stopping kind, or the relationship-destroying kind?" "The second kind," Elisa said, without hesitation. "Perfect." Isabel smiled with satisfaction. "I'll be at your house in an hour, with some options that will make you feel like the goddess you always were." The fifth dress was the one that made Elisa stop breathing. It was a deep emerald green, the same color as her eyes, with a cut that perfectly combined modernity and classicism. The fabric flowed like water over her body, accentuating her silhouette without being vulgar, and the backless design was a work of subtle seduction. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the neglected wife she had become, but the powerful woman who had always been dormant beneath the layers of submission. Meanwhile, at Villalba and Associates, Adrian was having his own series of tense conversations. Julian had requested a private meeting, and Adrian could feel his partner's disapproval emanating from him like heat waves. "Adrian, we need to talk about Michaela," Julian said, closing the office door. "She is taking unauthorized commissions from our Brazilian clients. I found discrepancies in the contracts she drafted, commissions that go directly into a personal account of hers." Adrian felt his blood run cold. "What are you talking about?" "You're being used, Adrian," Julian said, his voice filled with pity and frustration. "Michaela is not interested in you. She is interested in your position, your access to clients, your signature on the contracts." "What do you want me to do?" Adrian finally asked, his voice defeated. "End it. Tonight. At the gala event, make it clear that there was a misunderstanding about her status at the company. Go home with your wife and try to salvage what can still be saved. And if you don't," Julian sighed deeply, "then I will be forced to present this evidence to the association's board of directors. Adrian, our business reputation is at stake. I cannot allow this to continue." That night, Adrian arrived home earlier than usual, finding Elisa in the living room, reading a book. "Elisa," he started, sitting next to her on the sofa. "Maybe you should go with me to the gala after all, as my wife." Elisa studied him for a long moment. "Adrian, is there something you'd like to tell me?" "What are you talking about? About Michaela? About what's really going on between you two?" "You don't need to explain now," she said, rising gracefully. "As you said, some revelations are best made at the opportune moment. I'll see you at the gala event, Adrian. It's going to be a very interesting night. And for the second time that week, she left him alone with his lies, and a growing feeling that he had completely lost control of the situation. V. The grand entrance and the truth bomb. The Four Seasons Hotel was resplendent that October night. The annual event of the Business Association was the most prestigious on the social and business calendar. Adrian arrived impeccably dressed, with Michaela on his arm. She wore a golden dress that glittered under the lights, her posture carefully planned for maximum impact. Adrian presented Michaela with the rehearsed speech about her professional competence, but he couldn't help but notice the speculative glances they exchanged. Adrian, Eduardo Sierra, the association president, approached with a political smile. "A pleasure to see you here, and this must be the famous Michaela we've heard so much about." "Elisa prefers to take care of family matters," Adrian said, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "Fascinating," Eduardo said, but there was an oddity in his tone that made Adrian uncomfortable. On the other side of the room, Julian Ramos checked his watch. It was 8:40, and Elisa still hadn't arrived. He was beginning to wonder if her courage had failed her. It was then that the conversations in the room began to fade gradually, like ripples spreading across a lake. Heads turned toward the entrance, and whispers began to circulate. Elisa Villalba had arrived. She appeared at the top of the marble staircase that descended to the main ballroom, and for a moment that seemed eternal. Time simply stopped. The emerald green dress flowed around her body like liquid water, catching and reflecting the chandelier lights in an almost magical way. Her posture was that of a queen, shoulders straight, chin high, and those green eyes, that had always been her trademark, now shone with an intensity that seemed to illuminate the entire room. She descended the steps slowly, every movement calculated for maximum impact. There was no rush, no anxiety, only an absolute confidence that radiated from her like a palpable aura. The silence in the room was almost deafening. 200 people, CEOs, politicians, socialites, journalists, all stopped what they were doing to see this dazzling woman who had appeared like a vision. "My God," someone whispered. "Who is she?" "It's Adrian Villalba's wife," came the whispered reply. "Elisa Villalba. It's been years since we saw her in public." Adrian, who was in the center of the room talking to a group of investors, felt a chill run down his spine before turning around. When he finally saw her, his face paled visibly. This was not the submissive, neglected Elisa he had left at home. This was a woman completely transformed, a force of nature in human form, and she was walking directly toward him. Michaela followed Adrian's gaze and felt her own stomach clench. She had seen photos of Elisa, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the magnetic presence of the woman who now completely dominated the room's attention. "Adrian," she said, her voice softer than intended. "It's her, isn't it?" Adrian couldn't answer. He was completely mesmerized by the vision of his wife, a wife he had neglected, underestimated, and betrayed, walking toward him with the confidence of a warrior goddess. Elisa reached where they were standing, and the circle of businessmen surrounding them automatically opened to let her through. "Adrian," she said, her voice soft yet loaded with an authority that silenced everyone present. "What a surprise to find you here." She turned to Michaela, studying her with a gaze that was both assessing and completely impassive. "And you must be Michaela Duran. I've heard so much about you." Michaela tried to smile, but something in Elisa's gaze made her feel like a child being evaluated by an adult. Yes, I'm Michaela. I work with Adrian in international expansion." "How interesting," Elisa said, her tone remaining perfectly cordial. International expansion. Adrian always had such a passion for new territories. The insinuation was not lost on anyone watching. Several businessmen exchanged meaningful glances, and more than one journalist discreetly activated their cell phone recorder. "Elisa!" Adrian finally found his voice, though it came out huskier than he intended. "What are you doing here?" She smiled then, not the submissive, appeasing smile he knew, but something new, something that carried a dangerous promise. "I'm here as Julian's partner, naturally. You don't mind, do you? After all, I'm also part of the Villalba family." It was then that Julian appeared by her side, offering his arm in a chivalrous manner. "Good evening, Adrian. Michaela." Julian's voice maintained professional cordiality, but his eyes held a coldness Adrian had never seen before. "I didn't know you and Elisa were old friends," Adrian managed. "It's comforting to have true friends, don't you think?" Elisa replied before Julian could speak. "People you can completely trust." The word trust fell like a bomb amidst the conversation. Adrian felt the blood drain from his face, and Michaela instinctively moved closer to him, as if seeking protection. "Elisa," Julian extended his hand, "would you care to dance?" "I'd love to," she replied, accepting his hand without even glancing at Adrian. As they headed to the dance floor, Adrian stood there, watching his wife, a wife he suddenly realized he perhaps never truly knew, dancing gracefully in his partner's arms. Every movement of hers was elegant, confident, magnetically attractive. It was impossible not to look at her, impossible not to be drawn to her transformed presence. "Are you all right, darling?" Michaela's voice was laced with unease, but Adrian couldn't move. He was utterly fascinated by the woman on the dance floor, a woman he had taken for granted for years, a woman who was now showing him and everyone present exactly what he had lost, and the night had just begun. 6. The dignity of the exit. The visual waltz came to an end, but Elisa and Julian remained on the dance floor for a few more beats, talking in whispers that seemed intimate and conspiratorial. Adrian watched every gesture, every smile, every moment of closeness between them with an intensity bordering on obsession. "Elisa." Adrian approached her with that same unnerving calm. "Can we talk in private? You and I." They headed to a side terrace. Once alone, the veneer of social cordiality finally began to crack. "What are you doing, Elisa?" Adrian asked, his voice filled with frustration and confusion. "I'm being myself," she replied simply. "Something I forgot how to do in the last few years. You asked me what I meant about humiliation." Elisa's green eyes shone dangerously. "Adrian, you brought your mistress to a public event and introduced her as your partner. Who was humiliating whom? How did you know?" "Oh, how I know." Elisa took a step closer. "I know about Tegi. I know about the 5 months of lies. I know about the plans to discard me publicly while elevating Michaela to the status of your new partner. Elisa, I can explain." "You don't need to," she said, surprisingly calm. "In fact, I should thank you." "Thank me?" Adrian was completely lost. "Yes, you did me a great favor by showing me who you really are. Imagine if I had discovered this 10 years from now, after wasting even more of my life trying to be the perfect wife for a man who didn't deserve a single day of my dedication." The words wounded Adrian more deeply than he ever imagined words could hurt, because somewhere deep down, he knew she was right. "And Sophia?" he asked, trying to regain some control. "Sophia is going to be fine," Elisa replied. "She has a mother who loves her unconditionally and who will fight for her. As for her father," she paused significantly, "well, that will depend on your decisions from now on." "What do you mean?" "You have 2 options, Adrian. You can do this the civilized way. Divide our assets fairly, establish a custody agreement that prioritizes Sophia's well-being, and maintain a minimum of dignity in the process. Or," Elisa smiled, but there was no warmth in it, "or Julian can choose to share some interesting information with the association's board of directors about certain financial irregularities involving those Brazilian contracts. Adrian felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. You wouldn't do that, wouldn't I? Elisa's eyes narrowed. Adrian, you spent the last 5 months lying to me, betraying me, humiliating me, and planning to discard me like old furniture. What makes you think you still deserve my protection? It was then that Michaela appeared at the entrance to the terrace, clearly having searched for Adrian. She had touched up her makeup, but there was still visible tension in her shoulders. Adrian, darling, she said, trying to sound casual. People are looking for you. There are some investors who would like to. Michaela. Elisa turned to her with a smile that was pure elegance and pure poison. How lovely you're here. I was just talking to Adrian about decisions and consequences. Michaela looked nervously between Adrian and Elisa, clearly sensing the tension, but not fully understanding its source. Did you know that Julian told me some fascinating things about your creativity with international contracts? Michaela's face instantly drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. I'm sure you don't, Elisa said softly. But I'm sure the Argentine tax audit department would be very interested in hearing more about those creative commissions that ended up in private accounts. Adrian! Michaela turned to him, panic beginning to rise in her voice. What is she talking about, Adrian? He looked between the two women. His wife transformed into an unstoppable force, and his mistress suddenly looking very young and very vulnerable. For the first time in months, he began to see the situation clearly. Michaela was an opportunist who had seen an opportunity for social and financial ascent in him. And Elisa was everything he had forgotten she could be. Intelligent, strong, magnificent. Michaela, he finally said, his voice weary. I think you should leave. Michaela abandoned the terrace with quick, furious steps, leaving Adrian and Elisa alone again. And now what? Adrian asked finally. Now you choose, Elisa replied. Dignity or destruction? Cooperation or war? Respect or public humiliation? Adrian looked at the woman in front of him, his wife, the mother of his daughter, the woman he had sworn to love and protect. And he saw not only what he had lost, but what he had never truly appreciated. Elisa, he said, his voice breaking slightly. She interrupted softly. Not now, Adrian. Some words lose their power when they are said too late. You made your choice 5 months ago. Now I'm making mine. She turned to leave, stopping at the terrace entrance. And Adrian, the next time you choose a woman, make sure she loves you for the man you are, not for what you possess. You deserve that, and so does she. And with those words, Elisa Villalba left the terrace and Adrian's life forever, leaving him alone with his decisions and his consequences. Do you think Elisa made the right decision? Would you have forgiven Adrian? Share your thoughts in the comments. Epilogue. The wages of self-respect. Phan Ket. Ke Jia Kwalung Tu Trung. A year after the gala, Elisa has fully reclaimed her life, finding peace and power. The consequences of Adrian's choices and Michaela's opportunism are complete. The story concludes with the ultimate victory of self-respect over pretense. Final question. In the end, who gained the most? Elisa, by finding freedom, or Adrian, by learning the hard way? Share your thoughts. Bye. The New Order. A year and a half passed swiftly. The divorce proceedings between Elisa and Adrian were settled efficiently and discreetly, just as Elisa had demanded. Facing Julian's ethical evidence, Adrian chose cooperation over destruction, signing a generous settlement that secured Elisa's financial independence and established equitable co-parenting rights for Sophia. Elisa used the settlement not as a comfort, but as capital. She partnered with Julian to launch her own consultancy, focusing on ethical business practices and corporate governance, a subtle, brilliant rebuke to Adrian's past actions. She stepped back into the public eye, not as Adrian Villalba's ex-wife, but as Elisa Ramos, an influential businesswoman and philanthropist. Her elegance was now infused with an unwavering power that commanded respect. Julian remained her constant, trusted partner in business and in life. Their relationship was built on the foundation of honesty and mutual respect, the very values Adrian had discarded. 2. The dissolution of the lie. The consequences for Adrian and Michaela were stark and swift. Michaela Duran, stripped of Adrian's protection and exposed for her financial opportunism, was quickly let go by Villalba and Associates under Julian's cleanup mandate. The whispers about her creative commissions followed her everywhere, rendering her unemployable in reputable circles. Her ambition, built on sand, crumbled, and she returned to her home city, stripped of the glamour she had sought to steal. Adrian remained at the head of his firm, but he was humbled. He became a man perpetually looking over his shoulder, the weight of his betrayal a constant burden. He was a dedicated father to Sophia, fulfilling his co-parenting duties with sobriety and diligence, yet he was alone. He often saw Elisa at Sophia's school events, radiant, composed, always accompanied by Julian. He saw not hatred in her eyes, but a quiet, settled indifference. He realized the true cost of his actions was not the money, but the absolute loss of the remarkable woman he had pushed away. 3. The ultimate victory. Elisa stood on the terrace of her new, smaller, but brighter penthouse, watching Sophia play in the afternoon sun. She was no longer wearing the mask of the submissive wife. Her smile was genuine, fueled by self-respect. The memory of the emerald dress and the dramatic entrance at the Four Seasons was not a moment of revenge. It was the precise moment she chose freedom. Elisa realized that the ultimate victory was not getting her husband back, but realizing she was far better off without him. She took control of her narrative, her finances, and her identity, proving that a woman's worth is never defined by the man on her arm, but by the strength in her own spirit. Final message. The most powerful revenge is not malice, but success and absolute indifference. Elisa didn't just win the divorce, she won her entire life back. What lesson about the true price of success will Adrian Villalba never forget? Share your final thoughts.